I never thought the day would come when my own daughter would look at me with disgust and say that I ruined her aesthetic. Those words, they pierced my heart in a way I cannot explain. I am 70 years old now, and through every wrinkle on my face lies a story of sacrifice, of nights spent awake, of years I gave to raise her with love. And yet all she saw when she looked at me was something out of place in her perfect little world. You see, this house was not just bricks and walls to me. I bought it with trembling hands and aching bones after decades of working in a bakery, cleaning homes, and saving every penny I could. I told myself it would be my final gift to Amelia, my daughter, the child I once held close when she cried at night. She had always dreamed of a place with big windows and a garden full of roses. I remembered those dreams because I listened, because I wanted to give her everything she never had growing up. When I first opened the doors to this house, I imagined she would hug me and say, "Mama, this is perfect," and for a while she did smile. But then the magazines and the social media posts began to whisper into her ears about something called aesthetic. Slowly, my Amelia began to change. The warm, messy, love-filled home I had dreamed of became cold and pale. Beige curtains, walls stripped of color, furniture that looked too sharp to even sit on. And each time I placed a family photo on a table or laid my knitted blanket on the couch, she would frown, as if I had dirtied her spotless vision. That day, she stood in the living room with her arms crossed. Her voice was sharp and patient. "Mom, you ruin the vibe. You just don't fit in. This house is mine now, and you're messing it up." I stared at her, wondering if this was truly my daughter, the same little girl who once cried if I wasn't near her bed at night. I wanted to remind her how I had spent winters with torn shoes so I could save for her education, how I gave up every small luxury so she would never feel less than anyone else. But the words sat heavy in my throat. I realized she was no longer listening to her mother. She was listening only to the image she wanted to show the world. Her words burned into me. "You ruin my aesthetic?" As if a mother could ever ruin the home she built with her own blood and tears. At that moment, I felt something inside me harden, something that had been soft for too long. I walked outside without another word. My hands trembled, but my steps were steady. In the garage, leaning against the wall, was an old wooden stake and a red sign I had kept from a yard sale. I took it out, carried it to the front lawn, and pushed it deep into the earth. The sign screamed in bold white letters, "For sale." When I turned back, I saw Amelia's pale face at the window. Her perfect curtains framed her shock. For the first time in many years, I did not feel small, unwanted, or old. I felt powerful. If my presence ruined her aesthetic, then perhaps it was. Amelia stormed out of the house the moment she saw the bright red "For sale" sign stuck in the lawn. Her voice cracked with rage. "Mom, what is this? Are you out of your mind? You can't just sell my house." She grabbed my arm like a spoiled child who feared her toy being taken away. But this was no toy, and I was no longer the quiet, forgiving mother she thought I was. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Your house? Amelia, this house was never yours. I bought it with the wages of sleepless nights, aching bones, and years of sacrifice. I gave it to you freely, but I never signed away my dignity with it." My words were calm, but inside me a storm was raging. I remembered every shift I worked, every meal I skipped, every lonely night endured just to see her smile. And now, after everything, she had the audacity to tell me I ruined her aesthetic. She scoffed and tossed her hair back. "That's not fair. I've made this house mine. I've poured my energy and my style into it. You can't take it away just because you feel unwanted." Her voice dripped with arrogance, the kind that forgets its roots. I wanted to shake her, to wake her from the shallow dream she was living in. Instead, I steadied my trembling hands and spoke with the weight of truth. Do you know what it felt like when you said I ruined your aesthetic? It was as if every sacrifice had been erased. Amelia, I wore the same coat for 10 winters so you could have new dresses. I worked 2 jobs when I was too tired to stand, just so you could eat without fear of hunger. And yet here I am, told that my presence ruins the picture you want to show the world. Is that all I am to you? A stain on your perfect photograph? Her lips parted, but no sound came. For a heartbeat, I thought guilt flickered across her face. But pride swallowed it whole. She pulled out her phone. I'll call someone. You can't legally do this. This house is mine now. Her words were hollow threats, and she knew it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so that it cut sharper than a scream. Call whoever you wish, lawyers, police, friends. But remember one thing, your name is not on the deed. It is mine. I bought this house. I paid for it in full. And if I wish to sell it tomorrow, there is nothing you can do. I pointed to the sign standing tall in the grass. You chose aesthetic over family? Now you may lose both. Her face paled, her bravado faltering for the first time. You wouldn't dare, she whispered, almost pleading. But her disbelief was her weakness. For years she mistook my love for weakness, forgetting that love is not blind, it simply forgives. Today, forgiveness had reached its end. I turned away from her protests and walked back inside. Every step I took was heavy, yet freeing. The silence that had weighed on me for years was finally broken. She thought her world was built on beauty and control, but I was the foundation beneath it. Without me, her perfect world would crack. And soon, Amelia would learn just how. That night, the house was silent, yet my heart thundered as though a storm lived inside me. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wood I had polished 100 times. My hands rested on it, remembering the meals once served there, the laughter that used to fill this home. Now, silence had replaced joy, and I felt like a guest inside the very walls I had built for my daughter. Amelia had locked herself in her room, sulking, her angry footsteps still echoing in my memory. She believed I was bluffing. She believed her mother would never have the strength to carry through with such a bold decision. But love does not mean weakness, and she was about to discover that. I thought back to the first day I bought this house. The air smelled of fresh paint, sunlight spilled through the windows, and my heart swelled with pride. I never bought it for myself, I bought it for her future. I imagined her tending flowers in the garden, preparing meals in the kitchen, welcoming friends with warmth. I wanted this to be her safe place. Instead, it had become nothing more than a backdrop for photographs, a stage where she displayed her so-called aesthetic to strangers. My sacrifice had turned into her vanity. The memory of the factory returned to me vividly, the roar of machines, the ache in my bones, the sweat dripping down my back. I worked double shifts when I could barely stand, eating little, sleeping less. Each dollar I earned, I pictured as a brick in her brighter tomorrow. And now, in that very tomorrow, she dared to say I ruined her aesthetic. I whispered into the emptiness, what is an aesthetic compared to a mother's love? What is beauty compared to sacrifice? The next morning, I called the realtor. My voice was steady. Yes, the house is for sale. Please list it immediately. She asked if I was certain. I said yes without hesitation. For years, Amelia believed she was untouchable. Now she would see that walls built on pride crumble quickly. That sign outside was not a bluff, it was the truth knocking at her door. Later, Amelia came downstairs, her expression defiant. So, did you take the sign down? She demanded. I met her eyes. No, the realtor will be here tomorrow. Her lips parted in shock. You can't be serious, she muttered, but my silence was my answer. For the first time, I saw fear break through her arrogance. That evening, she slammed doors, shouted into her phone, and filled the house with anger. But I did not engage. I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. For once, the peace belonged to me, not her. She had claimed that my presence destroyed her perfect picture. Now she would learn how fragile that picture truly was when the foundation beneath it was taken away. The next day arrived with a sharp knock on the door. Amelia had barely slept. I could see it in her swollen eyes and the way she stormed into the kitchen, arms crossed, chin lifted high. "Tell me you cancelled," she demanded. "Tell me this is another one of your dramatic lessons." Before I could answer, the knock came again, firmer this time. When I opened the door, the realtor stood there, clipboard in hand, her professional smile a clear reminder that this was no game. Amelia's face drained of color. "Mom, you didn't." Her voice cracked, but I did not soothe her as I once would have. I simply stepped aside and welcomed the realtor inside. She walked through the rooms, making notes, complimenting the natural light, the spacious layout. Amelia trailed behind her, protesting, arguing, trying to explain that this was her space, but the realtor only looked at me. The authority rested in my hands, not hers. Every corner of that house whispered the truth. My name was on the deed, not my daughter's. As the realtor inspected the bedrooms, Amelia pulled me aside. Her voice dropped to a furious hiss. "Do you have any idea how this will look? What will people say when they find out my own mother is selling my house out from under me? Do you know how embarrassing that is?" Her priorities were plain. She was not worried about losing a home, but about losing her image. Vanity had chained her heart, and she could not see beyond it. I sighed deeply. "Embarrassing? Amelia, do you know what embarrassment feels like? It is working in worn-out shoes so your child can wear new ones. It is walking into a store with just enough coins for bread while others look at you with pity. It is sacrificing your pride day after day so that your daughter might grow up never knowing that shame. And after all that, being told you ruin her aesthetic, that Amelia is true embarrassment." Her eyes filled with tears, but they did not fall. She turned her face away, unwilling to let me see her weakness. I almost reached out, almost softened, but then I remembered her cold words, the way she dismissed me like an unwanted stain. I let the silence grow heavy between us. The realtor finished her notes and returned to the living room. "We can have the listing up within 24 hours, she said. Amelia gasped as though the air had been ripped from her lungs. She rushed forward. "No, this is my home. You can't just." The realtor glanced at me, uncertain, but I nodded firmly. "Go ahead. List it." My voice was steady, final. Amelia stood frozen, trembling with disbelief. After the realtor left, Amelia collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. For the first time, I saw not arrogance, but desperation. "Please, Mom," she whispered. "Don't do this. I'll change. I'll make it right. Just don't take my house." Her words were soft, but I had heard promises before promises that dissolved as quickly as they were spoken. This time, I needed more than words. I needed proof. And that night, I lay awake listening to Amelia pacing in her room. Every so often her phone buzzed, followed by muffled whispers and frustrated sighs. She was searching for help, clinging to the idea that someone could undo what I had done. But the truth remained. The house was mine, and the choice was mine. For years she had ignored my words, but now she could no longer escape them. It was not victory I felt, it was sorrow mixed with resolve. I never wanted to battle my daughter, only to be seen by her. The next morning, Amelia sat across from me at the table. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes tired. "Mom, I didn't mean it," she said quickly. "I didn't mean what I said about you ruining my aesthetic. I was upset. You know how I get. Her tone was pleading but thin. I could hear it. She wasn't truly sorry, only afraid. She wanted the house safe, not our bond healed. I stirred my tea slowly. Words matter, Amelia. They linger long after the anger fades. Do you think I can just forget them because you regret the outcome? She blinked, caught off guard by my firmness. In the past I had softened, eager to forgive. Not this time. This isn't about one comment, I continued. It's about years of pride, years of pushing me aside as though I didn't matter. She tried to smile, her lips trembling. I do respect you. I shook my head. Respect does not hide me when your friends come over. Respect does not treat me like an inconvenience in the house I gave you. Respect does not reduce me to a shadow. The words hung heavy between us. I let the silence speak for itself. By afternoon, she tried a new tactic. She cleaned obsessively, polished counters, lit candles, even cooked dinner, something she had not done in years. She placed the plate before me. See, I can change. We don't need to sell the house. I looked at her effort, then at her face. Change is not proven in one gesture. It is proven in humility, in actions repeated day after day. I will not be fooled by quick performances. Her shoulders slumped, her mask cracked. Anger returned. Why are you punishing me? She shouted. My chest tightened, but I held steady. Because you must learn what truly matters. A home is not built on style, it is built on gratitude, respect, and love. If you cannot give those, then you do not deserve this gift. She slammed her door upstairs, shaking the walls. I sat alone at the table, staring at the untouched food. My spirit ached, yet it also felt lighter. She could rage and plead, but this time I would not bend. The sign outside was no longer a threat. It was my promise. The following morning, sunlight poured gently through the curtains, but the warmth felt foreign in a house filled with tension. I brewed my tea slowly, listening to the silence. For years, I had prayed for peace within these walls, yet now that peace felt heavy, almost sorrowful. Amelia had not spoken to me since the night before. Her door had remained closed, her pride locked inside with her. I wondered if she was thinking of my words or only plotting new ways to undo them. By midday, she finally emerged. Her eyes were swollen from tears she would never admit to shedding. She avoided my gaze as she poured herself coffee. I let the silence linger until she finally muttered, "People are already asking questions. My friends noticed the sign outside. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me?" Her voice cracked, but again, her concern was not about losing her mother's trust. It was about her image. Always her image. I set my cup down gently. Humiliation? Amelia, do you know what real humiliation is? It is standing in line at the grocery store with not enough coins in your hand while strangers glance at you with pity. It is working double shifts with torn shoes while your body screams for rest. It is being overlooked, dismissed, unseen. That was my life for years, and I bore it all for you. And now you tell me that my presence, my face, my love ruins your aesthetic? No, child. You are only now tasting the smallest drop of humility. Her cheeks flushed red. She wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she stormed to the window and yanked the curtain closed, as if hiding the sign would make it disappear. I almost pitied her, almost. But pity was no longer what she needed. She needed truth, and truth was rarely gentle. That afternoon, I received a call from the realtor. She told me a family was already interested, that they wanted to schedule a viewing later in the week. I agreed without hesitation. Amelia overheard and gasped, "You can't. This is still my home." I turned to her with calm resolve. It was a gift, Amelia. But gifts do not erase the one who gives them. You forgot that. Now you will remember. She ran to her room again, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Moments later, I heard her voice through the walls, sobbing into her phone. She begged someone, perhaps a friend, perhaps a lawyer, to fix what she could not face. But no one could save her from the truth. The foundation of her perfect world was cracking, and the cracks were of her own making. That evening, I sat on the porch with my tea, watching the sky turn orange and gold. I breathed deeply, letting the cool air fill my lungs. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control, of dignity reclaimed. This was not cruelty. This was justice wrapped in love, painful yet necessary. Amelia had chosen vanity over gratitude. Now she would learn that even the most beautiful aesthetic cannot survive without the roots of respect. 2 days later, the realtor returned with the interested family. A couple with 2 small children stepped through the front door, their eyes bright with hope. I greeted them warmly, offering tea, while Amelia stood frozen on the staircase, glaring down like a queen whose crown was slipping. She didn't speak at first, only clutched the railing as if the house itself might disappear if she held on tightly enough. The family admired every detail: the large windows, the polished floors, the garden in the back. Their children giggled as they ran through the hallway, their voices filling the space with a joy I had not heard here in years. I felt a lump rise in my throat. This house was meant to shelter love, not vanity. For a moment, I pictured them here, their laughter healing the wounds Amelia had carved into these walls. "Stop this!" Amelia finally burst out. She rushed into the living room, her arms spread as though she could block them from seeing. "This is my house. You can't just sell it out from under me." The couple looked startled, but the realtor quickly smoothed things over. I remained calm, my hands folded in my lap. "It is my property," I said gently, "and it is for sale. You are welcome to view it." Amelia's face twisted with rage. "You're ruining everything," she shouted. But the truth was simple: she had ruined everything herself. After the family left, Amelia turned on me. Her voice was hoarse, her eyes wild. "How could you embarrass me like that? Do you know what they'll think of me? Do you know how this makes me look?" I met her fury with silence. When I finally spoke, my voice was soft, but each word landed heavy. "This is not about how you look. It is about who you are. And right now, Amelia, you are someone who values strangers' opinions more than her own mother's heart." She recoiled, as though my words were a slap. For once, she could not scream. Instead, she sank into a chair, her shoulders trembling. "I don't want to lose this house," she whispered. "It's all I have." My chest ached, but I refused to bend. "No, Amelia. You have me. You've always had me. But you pushed me aside for an image, for an aesthetic that will fade like dust. If you had chosen family, this house would have been yours forever. But you chose vanity, and vanity does not last." She said nothing more that night. She wandered upstairs like a ghost, and the house fell into silence once again. I sat alone, gazing at the for sale sign through the window. Its red letters glowed in the dim light, steady and unshaken. For the first time, I felt no guilt, only clarity. My daughter had to learn this lesson, and if it took selling the very walls she idolized, then so be it. The following morning, I rose earlier than usual. The air was cool, and dew clung to the roses in the garden. As I stood by the window, I saw Amelia step outside. She moved quickly, almost furtively, toward the for sale sign. I watched in silence as she tugged at the wooden post, shaking it, trying to pull it from the ground. But the earth held it firmly, the same way truth holds fast when lies try to uproot it. After several failed attempts, she kicked the sign in frustration, then rushed back inside before she realized I had been watching. At breakfast, I pretended not to know. I set her plate gently in front of her. She pushed it aside, her appetite gone. "Mother," she began, her voice trembling with restrained anger, "you don't understand what this is doing to me. My friends are laughing. They say I've lost control of my perfect life." I sipped my tea slowly before answering. "Perhaps they are right. Perhaps it is time you lose control, Amelia. Control has blinded you to gratitude." She glared at me, her hands tightening around her coffee cup. "You've turned into someone cruel," she accused. I smiled faintly. "No, child. I've turned into someone who finally values herself. For years, I let you speak to me as though I were a burden. I let you believe beauty came only from surfaces, from what others could see. But beauty, Amelia, is born in respect. And you forgot respect." Her lips parted, but no words came. She lowered her gaze, ashamed yet unwilling to admit it. The silence between us was heavier than stone. Still, I felt no urge to fill it. Sometimes silence teaches more than 1,000 speeches. Later that day, the realtor called again. Another family was interested. They wanted to bring an inspector to evaluate the house more seriously. I agreed at once. Amelia overheard, and panic spread across her face. "Please don't do this," she begged. "I'll change. I'll be better. Just give me another chance." Her voice cracked, sounding less like a proud woman and more like the little girl I once cradled in my arms. For a moment, my heart softened. But then I remembered all the times she dismissed me, humiliated me, cast me aside for the sake of appearances. Promises meant little when they came only in desperation. That evening, she stood in the doorway of my room, her eyes swollen. "Do you hate me?" she whispered. I set my book down and met her gaze. "No, Amelia. I love you. But love is not always gentle. Sometimes love must correct, must wound, so that healing can begin. I am not selling this house to punish you. I am selling it to remind you of what truly matters." She turned away without a word, her shadow stretching long across the hallway as she disappeared into her room. And in that moment, I prayed not for her house, not for her friends, not for her image. I prayed for her heart. That one day, she would finally see that her mother's love was never her ruin, but her greatest gift. The days that followed grew heavier with silence. Amelia no longer stormed or shouted. Instead, she carried herself like a shadow moving through the house. She avoided my eyes, avoided the for sale sign outside, avoided the very truth pressing in on her from all sides. But avoidance could not erase the reality she now faced. The house was slipping from her grasp, just as surely as respect had slipped from mine years ago under the weight of her vanity. One afternoon, I returned from the market with a basket of fresh vegetables. As I walked up the driveway, I noticed Amelia sitting on the porch steps, her face buried in her hands. When she lifted her head, her mascara was streaked across her cheeks. She looked at me not with anger this time, but with fear. "Mother," she whispered, "where will I go if you sell this place? What will happen to me?" Her voice trembled, and for a brief moment I saw not the cold, image-obsessed daughter, but the little girl who used to cling to my skirt, afraid of thunderstorms. I set the basket down and sat beside her. You will go where you choose, Amelia. Perhaps you will find a place that matches the aesthetic you hold so dear. Or perhaps you will finally build a home with love at its core. Instead of appearances, she shook her head violently. No one will take me in. I'll be humiliated. Everyone will know I failed, I sighed. Failure is not the end, child. It is the beginning of wisdom. But you must accept it first. The realtor called later that day to confirm the inspection appointment. I agreed, and when I hung up, Amelia was standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wide with desperation. Please cancel it. I'll do anything. The word anything hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. Anything? I asked softly. She nodded quickly, her hands twisting in nervousness. I leaned closer. Then start with this, respect. Speak to me not as a blemish, not as a burden, but as your mother. Can you do that? Her lips quivered, but no words came. She turned and fled upstairs, slamming her door once more. That evening, as the sky dimmed into twilight, I stood by the for sale sign. Neighbors passed by, casting curious glances, whispering among themselves. I felt no shame. For too long, I had carried shame like a cloak, covering the wounds of my daughter's disregard. Now, standing firm with the sign planted deep in the earth, I felt dignity return. This was not the destruction of a family. It was the rebuilding of one, stone by stone, truth by truth. When I returned inside, Amelia was waiting in the living room. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slumped. I don't want to lose you, she said quietly. My heart ached, but I remained steady. You never lost me, Amelia. You only ignored me. But now perhaps you will finally see me. She didn't reply, only lowered her gaze as tears dripped onto the floor. And though the house was still hers in possession, for the first time in years, I felt the power of choice return to my hands. The day of the inspection arrived. The sun was bright, the air heavy with tension, and I could almost hear Amelia's heartbeat echoing through the walls. She hovered near the staircase as the inspector and realtor walked from room to room, making notes, tapping walls, opening cupboards. Her face was pale, and her hands clutched the banister so tightly her knuckles turned white. I remained calm, offering polite smiles and answering questions when asked. Inside, however, I felt a storm, a mixture of sorrow and resolve. This house, once a symbol of sacrifice and love, had been turned into a stage for vanity. Now, perhaps, it would return to its true purpose, sheltering gratitude. Amelia followed the inspector, trying desperately to point out flaws. The paint here isn't fresh, she muttered. The plumbing is old. The kitchen tiles are outdated. Her voice shook with forced authority, but her words sounded hollow, desperate. The inspector jotted a few notes without comment. The realtor smiled politely, accustomed to such resistance. I simply observed, knowing her performance was for show. She was fighting not for the house itself, but for the illusion it gave her. When the inspection ended, the realtor shook my hand and promised to follow up soon. Amelia trailed them to the door, her eyes frantic. You can't do this, she hissed once they left. This house is mine. My image depends on it. If you take it away, I'll have nothing left. Her words pierced me, not because of their truth, but because of their emptiness. Still, I answered calmly, you will have yourself, Amelia. And perhaps that is what frightens you most. Without this house, you will have to face who you are. Her lips trembled. For once, she did not yell. She simply stood frozen, as if the foundation beneath her had cracked. I turned away and walked to the kitchen, leaving her in silence. That night, I found her in the living room, curled on the sofa, staring blankly at the darkened window. The for sale sign glowed faintly outside under the street lamp, its presence inescapable. She whispered into the darkness, not knowing I was listening. Why doesn't she see I need this? Why doesn't she care? Her words stung, but not for the reason she thought. She still did not realize that what she truly needed was not a house, but humility. I stepped forward softly. "Amelia," I said, my voice low but steady, "I care more than you know. That is why I cannot let you hide behind these walls any longer. Love without truth is not love, it is indulgence. And I will not indulge your cruelty toward me any longer." She looked up, her face streaked with tears. For the first time, she had no defense. Only silence filled the room, thick and heavy. And in that silence I knew the lesson was finally beginning to take root. The following morning, the realtor called with news. An offer had been made. It wasn't final yet, but it was strong, serious, enough to prove that the house would not sit unsold for long. I thanked her, my voice steady, while Amelia stood nearby, eavesdropping. As soon as I hung up, she stormed forward. "You can't accept that? You can't sell this house from under me." Her voice cracked with panic, but I only looked at her calmly. "It was never truly yours, Amelia. It was mine to give, and now it is mine to reclaim." Her eyes filled with fury and tears all at once. "You're heartless," she spat. I shook my head. "No, child. I am finally protecting my own heart." She recoiled as if struck, then fled the room without another word. The slam of her door echoed through the hall, but it did not shake me this time. Instead, it confirmed what I already knew: my decision was right. Later, I sat on the porch, knitting quietly while the for sale sign swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. Neighbors passed, some offering sympathetic glances, others curious stares. One elderly woman stopped to chat. "It's a lovely house," she said kindly. "But sometimes letting go brings peace." Her words felt like a blessing, reminding me that I was not alone in this storm. Inside, Amelia sulked in silence. I heard her pacing, heard her muffled sobs, and though my heart ached, I resisted the urge to comfort her. Comfort without accountability would only feed the very vanity that had poisoned her. That evening, she emerged from her room, her face pale. "Mother," she said softly, "what if I change? What if I treat you better? Will you take the sign down?" Her words were trembling, unsure. I studied her carefully. "Change is not a bargain, Amelia. It cannot be promised today and forgotten tomorrow. If you wish to change, you must show it in your actions, not your pleas." She sank into a chair, defeated. "But everyone will know I failed. Everyone will laugh at me." I reached over and touched her hand. "Let them laugh. Their laughter cannot destroy you, but your pride can. You think losing this house is humiliation. It is not. True humiliation is forgetting where you came from and who carried you here." She did not reply. Instead, she lowered her head, silent tears dripping onto her lap. And in that moment, I felt a shift, small, fragile, but real. Perhaps she was beginning to see the cracks in the facade she had built so carefully. Perhaps she was beginning, at last, to understand that love and respect are worth far more than any aesthetic. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. Amelia moved through the house like a ghost, her footsteps hesitant, her eyes often red from crying. She tried in small ways to soften her tone, asking if I needed tea, offering to help with chores she had once mocked. But her efforts were clumsy, born of desperation rather than genuine respect. I accepted her gestures politely, but I did not remove the sign. Actions take time to prove themselves, and time was the one thing she had run out of. One evening, I found her in the kitchen, staring at old photo albums I had left on the table. The pictures showed her as a little girl smiling with missing teeth, holding my hand tightly at a fair, clinging to me during her first day of school. She traced her fingers over the photographs, her face unreadable. When she noticed me, she quickly closed the book. "You always kept these?" she asked, almost ashamed. I nodded. "Every memory, Amelia. Because you were never a ruin to me. You were my reason." She swallowed hard, unable to answer. That night, she came to my room and sat on the edge of the bed like she used to as a child. "Do you really think selling the house will teach me anything?" she whispered. I looked at her, my heart both heavy and resolute. "Yes, Amelia. Because sometimes we only learn the value of something once it's gone. You treated me like clutter, like furniture that didn't fit your aesthetic. But perhaps when these walls no longer belong to you, you will finally understand what truly matters." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't want to lose you," she said again. I reached for her hand. "Then don't, I'm still here. But you must choose to see me, not just the house I bought you. If you cannot, then the house means nothing at all." She wept silently, her body trembling. For the first time, she seemed smaller, not the woman obsessed with perfection, but the daughter who once believed her mother was the center of the world. The next morning, the realtor called again. The offer had been formalized. The buyers were ready to sign papers within the week. I agreed to meet them. Amelia overheard, her face turning pale as chalk. She tried to protest, but her voice broke before the words could form. I knew then that the lesson was carving deep, cutting through the layers of pride she had built. Painful, yes, but necessary. For only in breaking could her heart be reshaped. The day of the meeting arrived. I dressed carefully, not in anything fancy, but in clothes that carried dignity. Amelia sat at the dining table, staring blankly at her untouched breakfast. She had barely spoken in 2 days, and when she did, her words carried no fire, only exhaustion. "Mother, please," she said weakly, "don't sign anything today. Just give me time. I'll change. I promise." Her voice trembled, but I did not soften. Promises, spoken in panic, meant little. "Time has been my greatest gift to you," I replied gently. "But you squandered it. Today the papers will be signed." We drove together in silence to the realtor's office. Amelia fidgeted in the passenger seat, her hands wringing, her breath shallow. For the first time, I realized she looked more like me than she cared to admit. Fear etched into her face, the same fear I once carried when life gave me no certainties. Only I had faced my fear with determination, while she tried to hide hers behind an aesthetic that never truly belonged to her. At the office, the buyers greeted us warmly. They were eager, hopeful, ready to make this place their home. I shook their hands, listening to their plans for the house, the laughter of children, the smell of fresh paint, the dream of building memories inside those walls. Their words struck me deeply. This house would finally be used for what it was meant to be, a shelter of love, not a showcase of vanity. Amelia could not contain herself. "You can't?" she burst out, her voice sharp with desperation. "This is mine. My whole life is in that house. Don't take it from me." The room fell silent. The buyers exchanged uncomfortable glances. The realtor looked at me for guidance. I drew a slow breath and spoke firmly. "Amelia, your life is not in a house. It is in the choices you make, in the respect you give, in the love you show. And if you believe your whole life is trapped inside 4 walls, then you have no life at all." Her shoulders collapsed under the weight of my words. Tears streamed down her face, but I remained steady. I picked up the pen, my hand unwavering, and signed the papers. With each stroke of ink, I felt years of pain lifting, the silent humiliation of being treated as a blemish, the ache of being dismissed in my own child's eyes. Amelia gasped as though the ink itself had carved into her heart. "You really did it," she whispered, her voice broken. "You really sold it." I looked at her, my own heart aching but firm. "Yes," I said quietly. "Because sometimes, losing what you think you cannot live without is the only way to learn what truly matters." When we returned home from the realtor's office, the air felt heavier than ever. The house no longer belonged to Amelia, though the walls still stood around her. She wandered through each room like someone walking through a museum of memories, touching the furniture, the curtains, the photographs as if they were already ghosts. I watched quietly, my heart torn but steady. This was her reckoning, and it could not be softened by my hands. That night, she sat across from me at the dinner table. The food lay untouched between us. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "Why would you take away the one thing that made me feel important?" Her words pierced me, but I answered firmly. "Because it never made you important, Amelia. It only made you forget what truly does. Importance is not found in marble countertops or perfect lighting. It is found in kindness, in gratitude, in the way you treat the ones who gave you everything." She looked down at her lap, ashamed. I thought people loved me because of how I lived, because of the way everything looked so perfect. I leaned forward, my voice soft but sharp. "No, child. They only admired a mask. And masks always slip. What remains beneath is what truly matters. And what remained in you was pride, not love." Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. For the first time, she did not argue, did not scream. She simply listened. I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "This lesson is hard, I know. But if I had let you go on believing that a house, a lifestyle, an aesthetic was your worth, I would have failed you as a mother. Sometimes love must wound in order to heal." Later that evening, I found her sitting by the window, staring at the for sale sign still glowing under the streetlight. She spoke without turning to me. "When the family moves in, will you leave me too?" Her voice was fragile, like a child's. I stepped closer. "No, Amelia. I will not leave you. But I will no longer let you treat me as though I ruin your life. I am your mother, not your blemish. If you wish to keep me, you must see me for who I am." She finally looked at me, eyes swollen, lips trembling. "I'm scared," she admitted. My chest ached, but I nodded. "Fear is not your enemy. Pride is. Face your fear, and it will pass. Cling to pride, and you will lose everything." She said nothing more, only wept quietly as the night carried us into silence. And though the house still stood around us, I knew its walls were already preparing to welcome new voices, new laughter, while Amelia was left to face the lessons she had long avoided. The weeks slipped by quickly, each day pulling Amelia closer to the inevitable. The buyers finalized their loan. The realtor arranged the closing, and the date was set. The house would no longer belong to her within days. Amelia drifted through the halls in silence, her fingers tracing the edges of picture frames, the smooth surfaces of countertops she once boasted about to her friends. Now they seemed empty, powerless to hold her image together. One evening, I found her in her old bedroom. She had opened the closet and pulled out a box I thought she had long forgotten. Inside were trinkets from her childhood, a faded stuffed rabbit, a broken locket, drawings she once made with crayons. She held the rabbit to her chest, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. When she noticed me standing at the door, she quickly tried to hide it. But I stepped inside, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Those things," I said softly, "they are worth more than marble floors and perfect curtains. They are pieces of your real life, Amelia. The part you've been running from." She didn't answer, but her trembling told me the truth was sinking in. Later that night, she joined me on the porch. The for sale sign creaked in the wind, its red letters glowing faintly. "Mother," she said in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it, "do you think they'll take care of it? The house?" I looked at her carefully. "Yes, because they see it as a home, not a trophy. They will fill it with laughter, not vanity. That is what this house deserves." Her eyes glistened. "And what about me? What do I deserve?" The question broke something inside me. I took her hand firmly. "You deserve to be more than a mask. You deserve to live honestly, with gratitude. But only you can decide that. I cannot give it to you like I gave you this house. You must choose it." For the first time in months, she squeezed my hand back. Her grip was weak, but it was there. She whispered, "I don't know how to change." I leaned closer, my voice steady. "Change begins with humility. With a single step. Start by seeing me, not as a blemish, not as a ruin, but as your mother who loves you still." The night grew quiet again. Amelia rested her head on her hands, staring at the glowing sign. For once, she didn't cry, didn't scream. She only sat in silence, her mind heavy with the weight of lessons too long ignored. And I knew the days ahead would either break her pride or finally rebuild her spirit. The day of the closing arrived with a gray sky hanging above us. Amelia woke early, but instead of rushing to the mirror to perfect her appearance as she always had, she sat quietly at the kitchen table. Her hair was uncombed, her face bare of makeup. She looked younger that way, almost like the little girl I once carried on my hip. But her eyes were heavy, shadowed by the weight of what she was about to lose. The realtor knocked at noon. Papers were spread across the dining room, and the pen lay waiting. Amelia stared at the documents as though they were written in another language. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "Just a few signatures and it's gone?" I nodded gently. "Yes, that's how fragile ownership is when it isn't built on gratitude. Things leave as quickly as they arrive." She bit her lip hard, then lowered her gaze to the table. As she signed each page, her hand trembled. When the last line was done, she dropped the pen and pressed her palms over her face. The sound that left her was not a scream this time, but a deep, broken sob. I let her weep because the tears were finally honest. They weren't about anger or pride or shame, they were about loss, pure and undeniable. And sometimes loss is the only teacher that reaches the stubborn heart. That evening, the new owners arrived for a final walkthrough. They brought their children, who ran through the rooms with laughter bouncing off the walls. Amelia stood by the staircase, frozen, watching them. One of the children pointed at the empty living room and said, "This will be perfect for the Christmas tree." Another shouted, "Can I have the window room?" Their joy filled every corner of the house, already planting seeds of love where vanity had once lived. Amelia's lips trembled as she whispered to me, "They already love it more than I ever did." I placed my arm gently around her shoulders. That is the truth you must hold on to. A house becomes a home not because of how it looks, but because of the hearts inside it. Later, as the sun dipped low, Amelia stood outside and touched the wooden porch railing one last time. Her hand lingered there as though she could pour her regrets into the wood. Then she turned to me with swollen eyes and asked, "Mother, will you stay with me tonight? I don't want to be alone." For the first time in years, her request was not laced with arrogance or demand. It was simply a daughter asking her mother for comfort. And so I stayed, knowing that perhaps, just perhaps, the crack in her pride was finally wide enough for the light to enter. The night after the closing was unlike any other. Amelia's room, once filled with luxury linens and endless decor, now stood stripped and hollow. She sat cross-legged on the bare mattress, clutching that old stuffed rabbit she had found days earlier. I sat beside her, the silence between us thick but not hostile. For once, she did not push me away. Instead, she leaned against my shoulder, her tears soaking into my sleeve. "I don't know who I am without this house," she whispered. It was my identity, my proof to the world. I stroked her hair, my voice steady. "No, Amelia. It was a costume. Identities don't vanish when walls change. They vanish when hearts grow hollow." In the morning, she refused to leave her bed. Sunlight poured through the window, but Amelia buried herself under the blanket. When I gently pulled it back, I saw her swollen eyes. "What do people think of me now?" she asked. "They'll know I failed. They'll laugh." I shook my head firmly. "Let them laugh, child. Their laughter is hollow too. What matters is how you rise. Pride cares about appearances. Strength cares about truth." For the next few days, Amelia followed me into the kitchen, into the garden, even to the corner store. She was restless, clinging to my presence as though afraid I would vanish. Each time, she asked small questions, tentative and fragile. "How did you live when we had nothing? How did you smile when the neighbors mocked us?" And each time, I answered with stories of resilience, nights when dinner was bread and water, mornings when hope was the only fuel. She listened like a child again, wide-eyed, searching for lessons she had once ignored. One evening, as we sat on the porch, she confessed something that nearly shattered me. "Mother," she said slowly, "I told my friends once that you embarrassed me, that your old dresses and simple shoes ruined my photographs. They laughed with me, and I laughed too. But deep down, I hated myself after." Her voice cracked. "I don't deserve your love." I took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You don't deserve it, Amelia. Love cannot be deserved. It is given. I gave it to you before you could walk, before you could speak. And I will give it until I can no longer breathe. But you must learn to honor it." Her sobs filled the air, but I let them come. She was finally facing her truth, stripping away the mask she had hidden behind for so long. As the stars appeared, Amelia whispered, "Will you help me find myself again?" And for the first time in many years, I answered without anger, without disappointment, only with hope. "Yes, my child. But you must be willing to walk the hard road. A mother can guide, but only a daughter can change." The days after Amelia's confession felt different, almost fragile. She no longer strutted through the world as if she owned it. Instead, she moved softly, like someone learning how to walk again. Each morning, she followed me into the kitchen, watching as I cooked simple meals. "You never complained," she remarked one morning, her tone curious. "Even when things were plain, you seemed content." I smiled faintly, stirring the pot. "Because contentment doesn't come from what's on the table, Amelia. It comes from who sits around it." She was quiet after that, as though my words stitched something in her heart. Later, when we visited the grocery store, she kept her head lowered, no longer chasing admiration from strangers. She carried the bags without being asked. It was a small act, but it carried more meaning than any designer handbag she once flaunted. One evening, she surprised me. She sat on the porch steps, gazing at the street, and said, "Mother, I want to work. Not just for money, but to know what it feels like to earn. To stand on my own without hiding behind gifts." My heart stirred. This was the daughter I had prayed to see, the one willing to grow. "Work will teach you more than pride ever could," I told her. "But it will test you too. Are you ready for that?" She nodded slowly, determination shining faintly through her weariness. The next day, Amelia applied at a small cafe down the street. When she came home, she looked uncertain. "They said they'd call," she murmured. "But I've never been on the other side of an interview before." I felt small. I placed my hand on hers. Smallness isn't weakness. It's humility. And humility is the soil where real strength grows. She didn't answer, but I saw the flicker of understanding in her eyes. That night, as we sat by the window, Amelia whispered something I had longed to hear. "Mother, I'm sorry. Not just for what I said about you ruining my aesthetic, but for every time I treated you like less than the woman who raised me." My chest tightened, tears pricking my eyes, but I held them back. Instead, I simply said, "Acknowledging it is the first step. Living differently will be the proof." The for sale sign had been removed days ago, yet Amelia still stared at the empty patch of ground where it once stood. "That sign changed everything," she admitted. "It broke me, but maybe breaking me was the only way to rebuild me." Her voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. And in that moment, I realized my revenge had transformed into something greater. It had become her redemption. A week later, Amelia received the call she had been waiting for. The cafe manager offered her a part-time position. When she hung up the phone, she looked at me with wide eyes, almost like a child showing me her first school ribbon. "They want me to start tomorrow," she said breathlessly. There was fear in her voice, but also a spark of pride of a different kind, the kind born from effort, not vanity. I smiled softly. "Then tomorrow you begin a new chapter, my dear. One where you build instead of display." Her first day was not easy. When she came home, her hands smelled of coffee and dish soap, her hair pulled back messily. She dropped onto the couch with a groan. "I've never stood on my feet this long," she muttered. "My back aches. My hands are raw." I chuckled gently, placing a cup of tea before her. "That ache is honest. It means you've earned your place today." She sipped quietly, then whispered, "It feels different. Hard but real." Over the next week, I watched her grow in small but steady ways. She began waking early, not to paint her face with makeup or arrange her hair, but to pack her lunch and lace her shoes. She came home with stories about customers, an elderly man who always ordered black coffee, a young mother with a restless child, a teenager saving coins for a treat. "They don't care what I look like," she told me one night. "They just care that I listen, that I serve them kindly." It feels meaningful. For the first time in years, her words carried humility. One evening, as we sat on the porch again, Amelia turned to me with a trembling smile. "Do you know what I realized today, Mother? That I used to think I was rich because of this house. But I was poorer than I've ever been. Now I earn barely anything, and yet I feel wealthier than I did surrounded by chandeliers." Her confession was soft, but it rang louder than any outburst she had ever thrown. I reached over and took her hand. "That is because true wealth is measured in gratitude, not gold. You are learning, Amelia. Slowly, painfully, but you are learning." Her eyes glistened as she whispered, "I wish I had listened sooner." I squeezed her hand. "The past cannot be rewritten, child, but the future can be reshaped." As the night grew still, Amelia leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder just as she had when she was little. For the first time in many years, I felt the bond between us mending, thread by fragile thread. And though the house now belonged to another family, I realized I had gained something far greater. I had regained my daughter's heart. The seasons shifted quietly, and with them, Amelia transformed. She was no longer the daughter who demanded luxury at every turn. The cafe gave her discipline, the customers gave her humility, and our evenings together gave her perspective. Day by day, she rebuilt herself not on marble floors or glittering chandeliers, but on effort, kindness, and gratitude. And I watched with a mixture of relief and sorrow, for I knew it had taken the breaking of her pride to reveal her true self. One night, as we walked past the old house that was now glowing with another family's lights, Amelia stopped at the gate. Children's laughter spilled out from the windows, and the scent of dinner drifted into the street. She stood there silently for a long time, her eyes fixed on the warmth she once took for granted. Finally, she whispered, "I used to think this house was proof of my worth. But looking at it now, I see it was just a shell. The real worth was always in the people who stood beside me." And I pushed them away. Her voice trembled. "Especially you, Mother." I placed my arm around her shoulders. "It is not too late, Amelia. You have lost a house, yes. But you have not lost the chance to live honestly. And as long as I breathe, you will never lose me." She leaned into me, her tears hot against the night air. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she murmured. I answered firmly, "Forgiveness is not about deserving. It is about choosing to love despite the wounds. And I choose to forgive you, my child." In that moment, she broke down completely, sobbing in my arms like the little girl she once was. And I held her, rocking her gently, letting her grief wash over both of us. For the first time, I felt not just the sting of betrayal, but the healing of reconciliation. My revenge had started with a for sale sign meant to shatter her pride. But it ended with the restoration of something far greater: her humility, her humanity, and our bond as mother and daughter. As we turned away from the glowing house, Amelia whispered with a shaky breath, "I don't want aesthetics anymore. I want a life that feels real. A life where I can honor you, not hide you." My heart swelled, and I pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Then you have already begun," I told her softly. And as we walked home together, hand in hand, I realized this had never been about losing a house. It was about gaining my daughter back. Pride had stolen her, but truth had returned her. And though the world may never know the full story behind that for sale sign, I would carry it in my heart forever, not as a symbol of revenge, but as the moment that gave me back my child.